haven't even looked at this new bow yet. I popped the top, that's it. Here is the new Mathews V3X, my first look at it. Of course, looks sexy. Oh my gosh, I'm stoked. Time to go set this up at Kyle's.
Starting route to Weber County Archery Range.
There he is. What's up? What's going on? How are you doing?
Good, how are you? Got the new bow. Here we are. Here with the Kyle Douglas, once again. If you don't know Kyle, he's a professional shooter. He also owns Douglas Archery. He had another great year. Not only shooting, but killed a couple bulls and a nice buck too.
Yeah, it's been a good year. Thanks.
Anyway, we're gonna get the new Mathews bow set up today, get her shooting. It's gonna be awesome.
Right, the Mathews V3X. There she is. All right, Kyle, let's do it.
Based off of first, since we have no knowledge of the launch yet, the new bow, what do you see new?
To me, it looks like they have a little, a new sight mount option. It's got a little tag kind of explaining that guy. I mean, you've got a little bridge in the riser here.
So that's a new bridge here in the riser. And then your new mounting option is right here. And then this is a 29, whereas I had a 27 last year. So that's the first thing we're gonna do here today.
So we'll start by just putting everything on the bow, all your accessories. I think we're just transferring everything from the old bow. So we'll just take it all off the old bow, put everything on the new one. You know, sight, rest, stabilizer, quiver, any of that kind of stuff that we're gonna be using. We'll go ahead and get everything kind of lined up and adjusted from there. We'll stick a D-loop on it, do your cam timing, level your sight, first, second, third axis, and just kind of get everything squared up and good to go from there. And then we'll start tuning through paper from there. Once we get it paper tuned, then we will go ahead and double check your PEEP height, draw length, all that kind of stuff, and make sure everything's perfect there if we have to adjust stuff. Then we'll just go back and double check the paper tune and make sure everything's good if we tweak anything, and should be pretty good to go from there.
Sweet, let's do it. All right, so right now Kyle's just gonna pull all the stuff off my old bow so that we can put it on the new V3X. So what we starting with first, Kyle?
I'm just gonna stick the rest on to start with. Just kind of the first thing that I grabbed. Back that set screw out just a little bit so it doesn't hit first. Putting the Hamsky Trinity on here. So we'll set it about right there. Just making sure things are square when I put this on. You can take in and set like a little level on your shelf and then on top of your rest here to make sure everything's perfectly square. On some rests it's a bigger deal than others, like on a rest that comes up to 90 degrees, it's a lot more important because if it comes past 90 degrees, when it comes up, then when the rest goes to drop, it's actually gonna bump your arrow up just a little bit and then drop. Where this Hamsky, it doesn't come all the way up to 90 degrees. So if it was to be cockeyed a little bit, it wouldn't really matter. We don't want that to happen though, so we're just making sure everything's square here. I'm gonna tighten that down. Barely tighten that set screw just a little bit into the riser and it kind of grips it. That way I can really crank on this rest without it moving anywhere. And then we'll finish tightening up the set screw from there. But your rest is one thing that you do not want moving. I mean, that little guy moves a 1/16 of an inch and you are gonna be all over the place. It's not gonna hit anywhere even close to what you did. So I like to make sure that sucker's good and tight, cranked on there good. As these little guys come with the Hamsky rests. All that is to basically hold your arrow for you while you draw back so it's not flopping around all over the place, and make it a little bit quieter when you're drawing back. If this wants to fall off on you, there's a couple things you can do. You can put a different double-sided sticky tape on the back that might be a little bit stronger. And if it's noisy on you, like if you're stalking on something or you're trying to draw back and it's really noisy, it'll be dinging off the riser here. So I just take a little piece of felt and I'll just line right on the very front edge of the riser here, across the front of the shelf and then up the riser. That way if it was to ding, a little bit, it would hit that felt and then it's completely silent. So you don't have to worry about that noise if you're shaking or going to draw back and your arrow falls off or whatever it may be.
Yeah, I could have used that this year.
Yeah, I tend to get a little bit of buck fever too, so mine's like sitting there wiggling. But we're gonna stick this limb pad on here, just put new ones on here. It does really matter where you attach the limb cord on the limb here. Sometimes it's kind of trial and error until you get it right, but what we're doing by moving this forward and back, we're actually adjusting the timing of your rest. So on these Hamskea rests, how I like to set them up, I like the rest to just start when it very first starts to drop. Should be about the middle of your letdown, maybe just a little bit in front of the middle of your letdown. That way it gives your rest plenty of time to correct and stabilize your arrow, and then it gets out of the way before any fletchings or anything come through. What actually happens is your arrow coming out of the bow, generally on a compound, your arrow is going to want to flex down into your rest, so it's going to push down into your rest, and that's when your rest is actually correcting it. And then as it's starting to leave the bow, your arrows actually tend to flex up and away from the rest just a little bit, and that's when we want the rest to fall out of the way, because it's already steered the arrow, everything's already corrected, and at that point the rest is just a hindrance to anything that we've got going on. If you get vein contact or the arrow comes back and contacts the rest again, it can cause a little bit of forgiveness issues and it's just not quite as accurate. So we're adjusting the timing of the rest by where this limb pad is attached. If we need it to drop sooner or later, we'll move it forward or back on the limb to kind of play with that. So we'll start kind of where I generally start on these bows. Typically, you don't want to go all the way to the very end because they'll drop too soon. But you know, somewhere within an inch or two of the axle on most bows, it's going to be pretty good. But it really depends on from bow to bow, and draw length and all that kind of stuff comes into play. So we'll start here and then adjust it later on if we need to. And then I like to come up here and just tie a half hitch to attach that cord around the limb. Same knot as you would use like for a D-loop.
Did you learn your knots at scout camp, or?
I'm self-taught on my knots. Something from scout camp, some of my own, you know. No, I use the same knots for most stuff in archery. I call it a half hitch, you know, what you would tie your D-loop on with. That I use for a ton of stuff, constrictor knots, serving, that kind of stuff. It's not a whole lot of different stuff that we use. I like to really crank that sucker down tight to make sure that it's helping hold that pad on there and in place. And if you were to have an issue with the pad wanting to come off or something like that, you could always just put a little dab of super glue underneath there and stick that sucker down so it's not going to go anywhere. Of course, you don't want to do that until you know that you've got that pad in the right spot, because it could peel off a little bit of paint on your limbs there.
Okay, here's a tip. When you set up your new bow, use an arrow that you use to kill something with, preferably a big buck, because then it's good luck. This is good luck, Kyle. This is my buck arrow, a buck killing arrow.
We'll get your bow off to a good start so that it knows how to shoot a buck killing arrow.
Yeah, you just gotta get them started off right, the new bows. So here you go, Kyle. Okay, what's the next step, Kyle?
We're gonna stick a D-loop on there. Just kind of put it on loosely so that I can adjust like the height and the center shot on the rest there and make sure those are good. One thing I like to do here is just put a good flare on the end of this. So I kind of like to fuzz them out quite a bit. Just so that there's no way that D-loop could ever pull the knots through on the end. And so we'll kind of melt this guy down. One thing you don't want to do is push the lighter on it like right away before it has a chance to cool just a little bit and smash it down, because then it just gets really fat and really thin, but it's really easy to break off. You want more of like a thicker ball on the end of there that's not gonna...
Mushroom?
Yeah, that's not gonna bust off. You don't want like a thin little fragile piece out there. And then I'm gonna cut that a little bit longer than what I would typically do. A little bit longer than you think, because you've still got to flare quite a bit on the end of this. So probably a little bit bigger than you may actually need, but generally overkills the rule here. We just don't want that to ever pull through. I mean, you don't want them to be gigantic where they're big and in the way and add a bunch of extra weight to the string or something like that, but just a nice little mushroom on the end of there. Okay, one thing I like to do here, especially for guys shooting a handheld release, where they're gonna twist that as they draw back an anchor, is I generally like to tie the D-loop on so that it goes with the way you're gonna twist the release. Not that it's gonna add all that much additional torque. Anything we can do to try and make it a little bit better, we do. So I'm actually gonna put the D-loop on here with the top knot on this side of the string and then the bottom knot starting on this side of the string. That way when Aaron goes to anchor his release, when he turns that, he's going to be turning it. The D-loop's not wanting to put additional torque. You know, you can go the opposite way too, and that's not really going to affect it a whole lot, honestly, but why not take any more additional torque out of the system if we can. We'll just tie this on finger tight for now, just to get started. All we're using it is kind of as a spot to hold the nock with while we're setting things up here.
The power of the buck killing was just harnessed. It was knocked for the first time.
So you'll notice I'm not using a level here. A lot of people like to use a little level to set up the arrow. You know, you'll clamp one on the string here, clamp one on your arrow, and make sure that the arrow's coming level out of the bow. I've kind of went away from doing that mainly because the first arrow you throw through paper, most likely you're gonna throw that all out the window as soon as you start tuning, because you'll either move your knock point or your rest up or down to get rid of a high or low tear. So why even start level when you're not gonna end up there? So typically you just kind of eyeball. I start with it just a tad bit knock high, because almost every bow likes to shoot just a little bit knock high. So we'll start with the arrow running just very slightly downhill, and then we'll move things where they need to go to tune it. There's no sense, you know, spending a bunch of time with a level when you're gonna adjust that the first shot out of the bow through paper. So that looks pretty good there. We'll start there. Center shot. Most people like to say that they set their Mathews up at, I think it's like 13/16. Not that it really matters all that much. As long as it's somewhere close to center shot, it's gonna be fine. We want to start with it center though, but depending on where the cams are sitting, if we have to shim those one way or the other to tune it, that could also change where the center shot sits and stuff like that. So we'll just set it at a good starting point, and then when we go to tune the bow, that's when we adjust everything finally to get it where it needs to go. So right now we're just kind of getting everything close and eyeballing it to get us as close as we can through paper on the first arrow, and then we'll go from there to adjust things. A lot of times I don't measure these. Just kind of eyeball them, but that's showing me the same thing that my eyes are, so we'll adjust it in just a little bit. And we may not end up with the final positioning being where it starts at, because on this particular bow it's got the top hat system to tune with. So what we'll do here, we'll get this set kind of where we want to start with it. Once we start shooting through paper, if we've got a pretty big left or a right tear, we'll go ahead and shim the cams using the top hat system and get those set as close as we can get the tear using those. There's 3 different increments of top hats that we can use, and then from there, if we need to adjust things slightly, then we'll just bump the rest in or out just a hair to get that last little bit out of it that we need to. So what I'm doing here is just kind of eyeballing, lining up the string down the center of the riser here, and then looking on if the arrow's running down the center of that, or if it's running off to the side one way or the other. So right now the arrow's pointed out pretty far. Your rest is too far to the right, so we're gonna bring that back over here and get that kind of centered up there.
Hamskis make it pretty easy to adjust, right?
Yeah, this Trinity here's got the micro adjust on there, so it's really simple. I mean, you just crack that screw loose and then you can just kind of fine tune it with the little dials there. It's a pretty slick system. Makes it so you don't like crack it loose and then like slide it way too far and then have to come back and stuff. One other thing I forgot to mention when we were setting the arrow height here, you know, where the arrow is actually positioned in the bow vertically. Different people like different setups, so it's kind of dependent on the shooter on where you like. I would say as a rule of thumb, most guys are going to start with their arrow somewhere around the center of the burger hole, or maybe a little bit high in the burger hole. Burger hole being, you know, your rest mounting bolt hole there is what they call out the burger hole. So when you're looking from the side, you know, typically that arrow is going to be somewhere around that hole. You don't usually want to go too much below it, because then you're going to run into fletching contact with your shelf there. Running above it's not as big of an issue, but it can actually change the way your bow feels and the way it tunes by moving that up and down. So some guys, if they have a tendency to maybe hold low on the target or something like that, they will walk their D-loop up the string until they find the sweet spot where their bow holds the best. You know, trying to get a little bit different leverage to change the grip angle in your hand just a little bit, or whatever it might be to make you hold a little bit better. But you actually can adjust your arrow height up and down in the bow to find, you know, kind of the sweet spot where it holds the best. I mean, we're talking very, very little differences here, but you kind of can play with that. But as a rule of thumb, start somewhere around the burger hole, maybe a little bit high in the burger hole. I tend to be, you know, my shafts on my bow, I think the lowest I ever run them is like bottom of the shaft in the center of the burger hole, or sometimes I'm actually completely above the burger hole. Just depending on the setup and what it likes, and different cam systems like different things too. You know, some cam systems don't like it when you start moving that arrow up or down, and they just give you tuning issues and stuff like that. So it kind of is dependent bow to bow and person to person, and different brands and stuff like that are all a little bit different there. Get that going. One thing on the rest, we do need to kind of set the tension on there to start with. This is a little easy glide system here. It's basically like a tent stake. All you do is pull that guy down tight. And then it's got an O-ring that slides up here. You don't want to over tighten this. It'll stretch out that spring, and it's going to make that easier for that spring to fatigue and break. And also it's going to change the timing on your rest. You can fine tune the timing by how tight this cord is, but you don't want to put too much slack or too much tension on there. Sometimes when these cords are brand new, they will have some stretch in there till they kind of get broken in. So on a brand new rest, I do like to kind of grab this and pre-stretch it in as much as I can. This one's already pretty well set because it's been shooting on the old bow for last year. But all we're looking for here is enough tension to keep that rest down solid. We don't want any slop in here. Like right now, it's got a little bit of slop in there. That's not what we want. We want enough tension to keep that rest all the way down, but we don't want to over tighten it to where we're gonna cause problems. Kind of adjust it as we need to when we're checking the timing and stuff on the rest. Set that guy there.
Time for the sight now?
Yes, time for the sight.
All right, so we just got the rest on, and now we're gonna take the sight that was on my V3 from last year. We're gonna transfer that, put that on the new V3X.
Okay, so we're gonna start with this sight rolled fairly close to the top here. That way you've got all the adjustment to roll it down. We don't wanna bottom it out probably, but we'll start somewhere around there maybe. Lock that guy down. And then you're actually gonna use this vertical adjustment here to get you close to start with. And then from there, you'll just roll it down and build your tape. But keep in mind it can throw off your second axis when we adjust this vertically, so we'll need to check that anytime we do that. But we'll just kind of guess on where your sight's gonna need to go for now. Okay, we're not gonna tighten that up super tight yet because we still have to level it up. Okay, are we going the same setting forward and back on here that we were before? Or?
Sure, yeah.
Okay. We'll go all the way in. A couple things that can change when you slide that sight in and out. It may change the way that your sight housing looks in your PEEP. You move it out farther, it's gonna look a bit smaller. Bring it's gonna look a little bit bigger. It's also gonna change like your pin gap. So the farther out you move your sight, your pins are gonna spread out a little bit more. The farther in you move it, your pins are gonna get a little bit tighter. Same thing with your sight tape. Your sight tape's gonna spread out a little bit more. If your sight's out farther, it's gonna shrink a little bit if it's coming in farther. So you will get a little bit more distance out of your sight if you slide it all the way in versus if you slide it all the way out. And it can also affect what they call torque tune on there. That's not something that we usually screw with a whole lot on these, and that's something that the shooter actually would have to do themselves. And essentially what torque tuning is you're trying to find the right spot where your rest and your sight will kind of counteract each other. So if you purposely torque your bow one way or the other, your rest is going to come out of alignment. So that's going to make you miss left or right depending on what way it's torqued. What you're trying to do is get your sight and your rest on the same plane basically, so that your sight moves the same amount to counteract however much your rest is moving your arrow off. So you could sit there and essentially you could purposely torque your bow left or right, and it's still gonna hit the same spot left and right because that sight's accounting for it. But that's kind of an advanced tuning technique, I guess, and that does need to be done by the shooter because you want to take everything into account. I'm not gonna hold the bow the same way that Aaron is. It's not gonna hit the same for me as it will for him, so we can't really do that right now. So we're gonna go ahead and level your sight now. It looks like you've got a second and third axis on this, no first on this sight, which is not a big deal. First isn't all that important anyways. So we're just using the little Hamskea tool here. This is a Hamskea level just to do the second and third axis.
So what you're telling me, Kyle, is just because we're putting this one on from my old bow doesn't mean it's gonna just be all sighted in and ready to go?
Definitely not.
Dang it.
Second axis technically should have been the same from bow to bow. That's not really going to change your second axis, but it looks like the old one got bumped or something like that when you're hunting last year. So I was just double checking and re-go through everything when we're setting up a new bow. There's no sense in setting up a bow without double checking everything on there. Now we're going to do the third axis on here. Third axis does need to be done at full draw. If you don't level your third axis at full draw, you're not taking into account all the torques and different factors on the bow, which we will probably need to tighten up your D-loop and stuff before we do that. So we'll just leave level on here until we get ready to drop back, and then we'll go ahead and do your third axis on there.
All right, quiver time.
Maybe. Okay, we're gonna tighten up your D-loop a little bit. Check your third axis, check your timing on the bow, and then we're gonna go ahead and shoot it through paper. You notice I haven't tied a nox head on here yet. Sometimes I like to play around and see what the bow's gonna wanna tune like first before I go ahead and tie that nox head in. There has been times when you tie one in and then you end up having to completely readjust everything and cut it out 5 different times to try and get it set where you want. So we'll leave it without a knock set first, get the tune close, tie a knock set in, and then check the final tune once we've got that there, and then just fine tune from there. It's a smart idea to have an arrow in the bow when you're drawing it back in the drawboard. If something happens, the bow don't blow up. There are situations where I would rather have the bow blow up than an arrow go shooting out in a direction that I don't want it to. So kind of make a smart decision there whether you put an arrow in it or not when you're sticking it in the drawboard. But just know that if there's not one in it, it could blow up your bow if something were to fail on your drawboard. But if it fails right now, we will put a hole in the door. Wow, that timing is dead on from the factory. That doesn't happen that often.
Sweet.
Okay, so checking the third axis here. I'm using the Hamskea. I'm using this pin instead of the actual level on the Hamskea, and we're checking that on a level line. So I've sharpied a line here on the wall with a level, and then I'm gonna go ahead and line up these pins on that while aiming downhill to make sure that that lines up with the bubble here. If I use just the bubble in the Hamskea level, it's not gonna take into account, or it'll be thrown off by the torque of the bow. So when you draw the bow back, it's actually gonna have some natural induced torque in there because you're gonna transfer some load into your cables here, and that's gonna twist the bow a little bit different at full draw than it does static. So we need to take that into account when we're doing your third axis. I'm gonna start and check it with me shooting it, and then we can also double check it with Aaron shooting it to make sure that he's not torquing the grip any different than what I am, by giving us a weird reading on that. So don't make fun of me drawing back his left-handed bow.
Can't wait to see this. Pretty smooth.
Actually looks dead on from your last one. We're not gonna have to change anything.
Sweet.
So one thing that is critical here while we're paper tuning, you gotta make sure there's enough distance that your arrow gets completely through the paper before it starts going into the target. If you accidentally set your paper a little bit too close, once your arrow starts touching the target, it'll throw your tear all sorts of weird and you're getting a false reading and stuff. So we'll start up here kind of closer to the paper, and then if we want to, we can kind of move our way back farther just to see if the tear will show up more or less the farther we get back. Typically past 4 or 5 yards, a lot of times the tear will actually start to get smaller again because the veins are starting to take over from there. So we'll just kind of play around with that distance. We'll start here close just to kind of get an idea of what the bow's gonna do, and then we'll adjust it as we need to. Okay, we got a little bit of a low left tear there, so probably play with your top hats.
So we have a low left tear.
Yep, so we're gonna start with the top hats. We're gonna shim the cams over a little bit to the left to kind of get rid of that left tear. And then the up and down, I'll probably bump your D-loop up the string just a little bit, or we could move your rest down just a little bit and then see where it's at from there. So one little thing on these Mathews, if you crack the axle screws loose, just crack them loose before you put the bow in the before you press the bow. It's gonna be a little bit easier because sometimes that axle will just sit inside there and spin if there's no tension on it. Where right now we've got all the tension on there, we'll just crack that loose. That way we know it's gonna move once we crack that guy. So to start with, I'm just gonna take these stock spacers that are in here and flip them. One thing that is very critical on a Mathews is you don't want to over tighten these axle screws. If I were to over tighten these axle screws, it's going to squish the bearing in there and make that bearing go bad way faster than what it ever would normally. So you want to make sure that when you're doing that, it's not putting any tension on there. Typically you're just going to barely tighten it up till it kind of contacts, and that's pretty good to start with, but to really check, you can kind of pull the string off there and you'll feel the tension in there. So as I turn this tighter, I can feel there getting to be some resistance in the cam. There's getting to be some friction. You don't want that. You want that to spin completely free on the bearings. We're just going to back that off and set that where it needs to go.
Geez, you act like you've done this before. Time or two.
Plenty of times.
See how she does now?
Yeah. You'll notice that I'm the one shooting the bow here, which typically is what happens. I will shoot the bow to tune it to start with, and then we'll have Aaron go through and double check. Obviously, he can't shoot it and make a video at the same time. So I'm shooting right now, but we will double check the bow with him shooting it because he may grip it just a little bit different, so we'll want to account for that. But to get it started, we'll get it close with me shooting and then have him go and shoot that, just as a disclaimer, because I know there's going to be somebody comment on here that
Why is Kyle shooting Aaron's bow?
that I can't tune his bow for him, which is true. We do want to have him shoot the bow, but to get it close to start with, we're having me shoot it. Okay, we're almost there.
Ooh, that's close, huh?
Yeah. So from here, we're gonna adjust the knock point just a little bit. And I'm actually gonna tighten the knock set now that we know that we're close. And then we will just fine tune a little bit with the rest if we need to.
So what exactly did you do with the knock point there?
So I slid it up just a little bit because we still had just a shade of a low tear. Slid that up just a little bit, and now we're tying in the knock set. Sometimes when you tie in a knock set, it will actually start giving you a little bit more of a lower tear, so it just depends on the bow. Sometimes it'll change it, sometimes it won't when we put this in here. You can always start with the knock set in there just from the get-go. Sometimes if you have to rearrange everything and change a whole bunch of stuff, it's easier to start without it and then throw it in there and double check. You're kind of going back over things twice and having to recheck tune and all that kind of stuff, which sucks, but it can be a little bit faster sometimes to do it this way if you do have to move your knock point around a bunch. So what this little knock set's gonna do for us, a couple different things. First off, it's gonna try and eliminate knock pinch so that your arrow's not wanting to float up off of your rest. Sometimes if you got a lot of knock pinch going on, that's gonna float up. Another thing it'll do is if you were to have an issue and you need to change out your D-loop, it's gonna give you a spot to go back to. So theoretically, you shouldn't have to change your tune or anything. If you threw a new D-loop on there, it should be the same as it was before. You'd always want to double check that. The reason I don't do a top and bottom knock set, because it's super hard to get the spacing exactly perfect. If I were to tie a top and a bottom knock set on here and the spacing were to be off just a little bit, at full draw there's either going to be too much gap in between the knocks here, or there's going to be too little gap and it's going to start pinching your knock there. If you just tie the one on the bottom, it actually puts a little bit of down pressure on the arrow, so it's actually going to push it a little bit more down into the rest, which is what we want. We don't want it floating up off. And then the top knot on the D-loop will kind of actually self-adjust over time and get it set where we need to as far as spacing goes. If we need to like spread it out or something, you can always flip your knock onto here, hold it down here, and you can wiggle that arrow back and forth like that, and that will actually spread out your gap here if it was starting to pinch. You need a little bit more gap there. So close, almost there. Seems like we got still just a teeny tiny little bit of a left tear. Yeah, that's probably good enough to start with, but we want to get it perfect.
So when you're that close, you don't want to mess with the top hats, right? It's more of just little adjustments.
Yeah, so we're just gonna bump the rest just a little bit. If I were to move your top hats from here or change out to a different top hat, it's gonna move it way more than what we need it to. We're just doing very, very finite adjustments right now. Just a little bit too far.
Close, huh?
Yeah, I mean that's probably good enough to have you shoot it from here actually. Moved it just a little bit now, it's actually a little bit to the right. So we're just gonna go ahead and have Aaron shoot the bow here. Now that we know we've got it really close for me, we can bump the rest just a teeny little bit one way or the other if we need to when Aaron's shooting it, and we'll be good to go.
All right, throwing on the Carter Quickie. It's my turn now. Kyle had his fun. It's about the right length, far away.
Yeah, we'll start with it there. Then we can always move back a little bit farther. You're gonna wanna aim a little bit higher so you don't hit those old holes.
All right. My first shot, a new bow, and we have a slight right, about what Kyle did. So we're gonna make another slight adjustment, right Kyle?
Yeah, we're just gonna move the rest in just a little bit and see what that gives us.
Okay, shot number 2. Made a small adjustment on the rest, and put her through again.
What was that one? Ooh, really close.
Whew, We're getting close.
So that's still just a little bit to the right.
Oh yeah, it's slight right.
Yep.
Shot number 3. Another slight adjustment. We should be good here after this.
Oh, I think you might have torqued that one just a little bit.
Torque that. All right, so Kyle put a perfect bullet hole through. I torqued it last time, so just want to shoot it one more time, get a good grip, make sure I don't torque. Hopefully, it's good. Gosh, I felt that one.
That was a little better than the last one though. So it's just off just a little bit.
All right, last shot, my knee. So now setting the PEEP height now.
Yep, we gotta get your PEEP height set and then you should be good to go from here.
Sweet.
So we've got a little wrap around your PEEP here. That way if you shoot it when we're checking your PEEP height, that PEEP's not gonna come flying out of there on you. Just a little safety thing. But now we're gonna have you draw this back, check your PEEP height, and we'll adjust that to where it fits you and then tie it in. And you should be pretty good to go from there.
Sweet. And this is the Hamsky Raptor, right?
Yeah.
What's your favorite, what are the diameter?
Yeah, so that just depends on the size of your housing on your site there. So you get a fairly large housing on there. So you get the 3/16 PEEP in there. That should match up pretty good. We want your PEEP size to be, you know, roughly the same size as that ring on your site there. Maybe just a little bit larger than that. If you go smaller than it, you're not going to be able to see your bubble and you're not going to be able to see the whole ring to center it up, and that's going to cause you issues. And we don't want to go too big to where it's hard to center your PEEP on the housing there, because then you're going to be all over the place. So we just want to match that size to fit that perfectly. They've got a whole bunch of sizes of these guys. You know, when they first come out, they had 1/8, 3/16, and 1/4. Now they've got a bunch of in-between sizes, so you can really fine-tune your PEEP size to your housing size there.
All right, so we're just checking PEEP height, right? And you're gonna slide.
Yeah, I'll move it for you. So what we're looking to do, I want you to close your eyes before you anchor.
Okay.
So draw back, close your eyes, anchor and settle in like you normally would, and then when you open them, your PEEP should be perfectly centered on that housing there. You shouldn't have to do that. And we're actually gonna set that, just guessing off your old bow, you know, a little bit closer to the top there.
Okay.
So like on a single pin, you go about the middle of your range, and you don't wanna set your sight like with your sight set down at 100 yards, because then when it goes back up to 40, you're gonna be squishing to see through your PEEP.
Okay.
Yeah, just close your eyes, set in your anchor. When you open them, it should be perfectly centered without having to move your head. Does that need to go up or down? It needs to go down. Quite a bit or just a little bit?
A little bit.
Okay.
It's pretty nice.
Pretty close there?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, go ahead and let down and we'll retry it. So we'll check it a couple times just to make sure that it's
Close
perfect. Yeah.
Same thing?
Yep, just that way you're not influencing how you're setting your anchor trying to see through your PEEP. So we want to make sure your PEEP's set really good, because that's pretty critical.
Yeah.
That's perfect there? Okay. Go ahead and tie that in for you. Okay, so I'm gonna cut off this little string I've got around there now, this piece of serving. All that was there for was just in case the bow happened to go off, so the PEEP, there's no way the PEEP could fly out of the string. And we're gonna go ahead and tie it in. So I'm gonna tie these in a little bit different than what most people are probably used to seeing. The reason I like to tie these Hamsky PEEPs in this way, there's two reasons, I guess. One being they are a longer tube on the PEEP site there. So I like to actually serve in between the PEEP itself and the string. That way it's protecting in there where it is contacting over a larger area. There's more chance that the PEEP could rub the string there. They've got a slick coating on the PEEPs here, so it's usually never an issue, but I just like to bulletproof everything that I can. The other reason being that you absolutely will not be able to move this PEEP after we get done tying it in. I mean, you could hang your bow up by the PEEP site and that thing would never move. And we don't want you to get out there hunting and accidentally bump it or something like that. You know, there's guys out there that'll tie like a top knot and a bottom knot and then just mark their PEEP. If they bump a little bit, move it back. We don't want to have to deal with that. We just don't want it to be able to move in the first place. And then we'll go ahead. So I start with a constrictor knot and then just kind of go half hitches on all 4 legs from there. Make sure we pull everything tight. So we'll do opposite legs. So first I'll serve down this side, then I'll start here and go up, and then I'll start with a new piece of serving, tie another constrictor, and then do the opposite too. When you're burning those little tag ends, always make sure that the flame is coming up from the string, so rotate this whatever way it needs to go. If you ever put it below the string or to the side, you're gonna burn some of that string material, and then you gotta get a new string. So that's never any fun. That would not be good. So on this side, I'm gonna start with the first knot just on the bottom there to make sure it's locked in good, and then I'll start going on top. Just don't want any gaps or anything in the serving, and make sure everything's pulled tight. I'm actually counting as I go here to make sure I get the same amount of knots on all sides. So we got those two done. We're gonna grab a new piece of serving and then do the other two legs. So I'm just gonna draw this back and shoot it once or twice to let that PEEP settle. I had to add a twist to your string, or actually take a twist out of your string to make that come back around straight. So we wanna make sure that that's not gonna be cockeyed on you, and let that settle after a shot or two, and then we should be pretty good to go. I'll probably serve in the rest a little bit here. It should be set. So that's twisting just a little bit. Pretty close.
All right, what we got next?
Okay, so what I'm gonna do now is serve in the cord a little bit on your rest. Not something that you have to do, but something that I tend to like to do just to kind of bulletproof the rest the best that I can. If something were to like grab onto this and snag it really hard, that could slide up, and that would change the timing on your rest or make it so your rest doesn't drop all the way. So I like to put a little bit of serving here just to make sure that that stays where it's at. So we're gonna tighten. It's just a little bit more tension on that guy. Okay, and I just kind of do half it, just working up this. But we're just gonna start right here and serve in that guy. That way, even if something like grabs that or rips it or whatever, there's no way that the timing on your rest can change. If we need to adjust it later on, we'll just cut off this little bit of serving and then we can play with that. So just one more way to bulletproof everything on this bow so you don't have an accident out there hunting. We don't want to let the deer get away.
No. We don't.
It's a bad deal.
Don't want accidents. No accidents.
For setting in, we'll start where it's at now. And then we can, if we need to slide this up or down, we can slide that up or down.
Pretty much set up. We just need to sight her in.
Yeah, she's pretty well ready to go.
All right, so we got the V3X all set up. Kyle did an awesome job. Tuned really well, really easy. And now we're just gonna get it sighted in to 20 yards and we'll go from there. So we're gonna start really close. So we'll see where we're at. Then we'll work our way back. Hopefully it's just small adjustments where I can roll the dial at first. If I'm way off, then we'll have to do some, more serious adjustments. But hopefully we're close. We can just fine tune it. But we're gonna get it to 20 yards and then we'll be done. All right, so we're at about 10 yards here, and we're gonna let one fly and see where we are at. We're high. Little high. Close to 10 yards, I was high, so we just moved target back to 20 yards, and we're gonna make a small adjustment. Okay, shoot again. A little bit high, make another adjustment, shoot again. So up and down look pretty good, huh?
They're pretty close, yeah.
All right, up and down is good. Made a left to right adjustment. Shoot again. Got the left to right good. I'm a little low, but from here, I'm close enough. I can start grouping. I can start micro tuning on that HHA sight. Now it's just time to put some time behind the bow, and yeah, we're getting close. All right, guys, thanks for watching my V3X build. Thanks, Kyle. Courtesy of Kyle. You did an awesome job. That was pretty easy to tune, huh?
Yeah, it went together pretty slick. Didn't take a whole lot. I think we were, pretty close to a bullet hole in 3 shots, I want to say.
Yeah, so sweet. So the V3X is all set up. We got her pretty close to 20 yards. Now it's just time to group, right?
Yeah, now it's all on you. Gonna put her to use.
Kyle said that he bulletproofed everything, so if something happens, it's not his fault. So. Anyway, thanks for watching, guys. We appreciate it. Make sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel, give the video a like, drop a comment. Thanks again, Kyle. Appreciate it, man.
Not a problem.